In Joseph Conrad's book, Heart of Darkness, European colonialism is criticized through the telling of Marlowe's story of his trip into Africa. In the lens of postcolonial theory, Heart of Darkness portrays the changes in native cultures and how they are treated as a result of the arrival of Europeans. The ways in which natives are characterized in contrast to the Europeans emphasize their subtle shift away from their original lifestyle. Postcolonial theory seeks to examine the results of colonization on the culture, ideology, and lifestyle of the native people. The arrival of settlers often results in the belittlement of the natives and their traditions, and ends with a gradual fusion of some aspects of colonizer and native cultures. The repeated portrayal of the natives as inferior comments on the changing power dynamic between the two groups, even in the native country. Reading through the postcolonial lens requires attentiveness to the differences in what would be the traditional ways of life and cultural identity in comparison to what is portrayed in the story for both the colonizer and the colonized. This intermingling of cultures becomes evident in the treatment of the native Africans as witnessed by Marlowe. At the onset of Marlowe's story, the city of London is portrayed with a sepulchre-like gloom against the tranquility of nature. Various ironic characters are introduced, and the pretentiousness of the colonizing society is highlighted through Marlowe's interview with the company. The doctor reveals his selfish intentions for glory without doing his proper job, as he views the potential of madness from going to Africa as a sign of being scientifically interesting, and his fair share in the advantages his country shall reap from the possession of such a magnificent dependency. It is clear in these quotes that the Europeans intend to exploit Africa and the people there. Colonization in this context is nothing noble. Via Marlowe's introspection and journey, it is seen how men who are involved in the European colonization process inevitably experience lapses or regression in moral convictions. Hunters for gold or pursuers of fame, they had all gone out on the Thames, bearing the sword and often the torch, the dreams of men, the seed of commonwealths, the germs of empires. Early in the book, Marlowe seems to admire the pioneers who explore the Thames River and foreign countries, but the underlying darkness of their conquest is already hinted. Destructive effects of colonization on native communities are suggested with symbolism of the sword and germs for violence and selfish intrusion. The changes in the native landscape are evident through the forced labor of the natives for inconsequential work. As they're made to do work for no reason other than for the Europeans to assert their dominance, it is clear that this unnatural change leads to drastic consequences for the natives. As Marlowe remarks, "They passed me within 6 inches, without a glance, with that complete, death-like indifference of unhappy savages." Their indifference arises from the altered power, as the natives lose their cultural identity to become described in almost animal-like ways. Through this, Conrad also comments on the tendency for incoming settlers to look down upon the natives as subhuman, and use that way of looking at them as justification for their immoral treatment. Marlowe is one of the few characters to recognize the injustice in this, as seen when he comes upon the grove of dying men and says, "They were not enemies, they were not criminals, they were nothing earthly now, nothing but black shadows of disease and starvation." With this statement, Conrad condemns the immediate association of the native people with enemies, and the inherent belief of the colonizers that they have the right to do whatever they want. Going deeper into Africa, Marlowe meets the company's central station manager and his uncle and overhears a conversation between the two. Here, a strong demoralization is revealed where they believe that anything is acceptable in Africa because there is no one who will know or hold them accountable. Mere survival is an achievement, and the manager and his uncle express no shame in their plots to ensure their own power at the expense of others' lives, both European and African. The El Dorado exploring expedition, although only mentioned briefly, represents the undisguised treasure hunting and raiding of the European scramble for Africa. The interaction between natives and settlers can also result in the combination of cultural aspects. In order to get a native to take care of the boiler on the steamboat, Marlowe uses the traditional native beliefs to encourage the natives to do his job. All the native knows is that should the water in that transparent thing disappear, the evil spirit inside the boiler would get angry and take a terrible vengeance. So he sweated and fired up and watched the glass fearfully, with an impromptu charm tied to his arm. This fusion of culture uses the technology from the settlers in combination with the ideology of the natives in a unique way. The native is made to understand the workings of the boiler through this description that is understandable in the context of his previous knowledge and beliefs. However, the portrayal of the Native woman as a proud and imposing figure counteracts aspects of postcolonialism that defined other parts of the book. This characterization reveals how the tribe had yet to be fully conquered spiritually. The tribal woman is described as a wild and gorgeous apparition of a woman, treading the earth proudly. She carried her head high. Her hair was done in the shape of a helmet. She had brass leggings to the knee. She was savage and superb, wild-eyed and magnificent. The strong imagery associated with her stands in stark contrast to other descriptions of the natives and women. While the savagery of the natives was previously looked down on, in this case the savagery of the woman is seen as a magnificent thing. She is also seen as a powerful being, whereas other women have been described in mostly weak and unfavorable terms. Despite her deference to Kurtz, the tribal woman retains her own power and culture even as she displays European influence. Her status exemplifies Conrad's real message of the difference between the passionate wildness in nature and the lurking gloominess in seemingly pristine European cities. Heart of Darkness reveals the deep-rooted darkness in London and Africa during the colonization process, but can also be interpreted as a social criticism of the lasting effects of European conquest. Throughout the book, Conrad reinforces the idea that the greatest offense to nature is being out of place, as the Europeans are when they attempt to raid and colonize Africa. The critical post-colonial meaning of the text is evidenced in the portrayals of inverted darkness and lightness, civilization and savagery, and glory and demoralization.